So hopefully to the benefit of many of you watching, this should you pull video is actually before the banner comes out. And hopefully that helps some of you make some good decisions, or at least help you guide you into non-regret. Let's take a look at Laegjarn and
let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to talk about Laegjarn, my opinion on where she stands in the current Fire Emblem Heroes metagame as usual. I'm actually going to touch on lethality in this video as well, so just some candidates that I feel would best use that skill or how I feel it is best used in the game. I did mention in my impressions video, which was earlier today or yesterday depending on your time zone, check the video tag above me thing or in the description, about lethality being a bit awkward. I feel that is still going to be the case. My first impression on it, that could very well change. Deadeye is conditional as a good special. It's pretty good, but it's still fairly conditional. And I kind of feel the same way about lethality, but it's even, I guess, worse because it's a higher special, but we'll talk about it when we get to it. I'm not going to talk on Marcia or Astrid in this video because I feel they are very specific characters that don't, if you're pulling for them, they're likely your favorites. But lethality and Laegjarn, there are definitely going to be some reasons to go for it one way or another. Before we jump into Laegjarn and my thoughts on her, the things that I would probably see most people summoning here would be lethality for that, special. Again, wait till we get into video for me to go into it. The Floret for Laegjarn, and of course Laegjarn herself as potentially a one-off, or some sort of air defense, air offense, potentially an arena unit long term. Now, I don't think any of those are necessarily worth spending orbs on. Even the Floret. Keep in mind that these Ascended heroes are permanent pool, and they will come back in the future and make pretty decent candidates, if you ask me, for stuff like Hero Fests or Legendary Mythic banner overlap, or just like better rates in general, like maybe on a 3-person banner. I don't feel like IS treats them that special. They could show up as pity breaks as well, so don't feel compelled to spend like 40 summons targeting Laegjarn just to get like a Floret. I don't recommend that. You will get these in time, and if you just think about it, it's literally like equal to 3 flowers on most units. When you provide another boon to another character, it's pretty much the equivalent of 3 stat upgrades on flowers, or about 1.5, 2 merges, something like that. It's really not that much, and I don't feel like 150 orbs is worth it. Lethality's is still like up in the air, but generally speaking, it doesn't seem worth it. For most, I would say it's a skip, but if they are your favorites, then you probably don't need my convincing, or you're not on the fence about this, and good luck to you. Anyways, guys, so smash the like button, sub if you haven't already, you know the drill, and it really does help out the channel, plus it helps me as an F2P way to keep providing you with content, so do your part as I do mine. Let's jump into this. We will talk about Laegjarn first and foremost. Now, this is pretty much her stat spread, as confirmed from the video itself, with a solid weight into her attack and speed, with defense being dominant over the res stat. I feel that's actually an advantage. I feel like a high defense stat is preferable over a high res stat, because most stuff you encounter tends to be more physical based versus res hitting. That's not to say there aren't. Stuff like Micaiah, Guinevere, for example, are pretty relevant, and there's definitely going to be some more anti-meta type of stuff where stuff is hitting res, dragons, but for the most part defense is favorable, so I would say that's a decent stat spread. She is a cav, which means she's limited to about 168 stats, base stat total, and that is a somewhat disadvantage compared to, of course, being like an armor like Fjorm, but still a decent stat spread nonetheless, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. She does come with Sparrow, Fartrace, and the new Rouse skill. So if you, again, watch my impressions video if you want more like thoughts on that. And her weapon is actually covered right here, so I will display that as well under me there. So her weapon is pretty much just a way of getting more stats. It's not really a bonus doubler. It's a slaying weapon with just like New's weapon. Her original weapon gives her all stats depending on her own buffs and the enemy's buffs. It's pretty good. It has some self-synergy with the Rouse skill, and generally will work really well on teams that are using some sort of buffs, which come from either Rouse, Gaps, Hone Cav, for example, 4 Cav, and enemy teams in general do use buffs, so it's not a terrible weapon by any means, and the conditions should be pretty easy. The self-null follow-up effect also lends well to like wind sweep builds or just builds in general where she really wants to get out that double. She uses like Flashing Blade with Ruptured Sky, for example. That's like a 100% proc rate as long as she has the speed and attack to do so. Her weapon also does make her deceptively bulky, because if she does reach that condition of 12 to all stats, that makes her very bulky, which will play well into a sort of playstyle that you may want to use her. And we'll discuss that right now. So, how I figure most people should use new Laegjarn is effectively on defense. I feel her best place will be on defense in a colorless bow role. I do feel she competes heavily with someone like Dual Leaf, though. I feel like Dual Leaf is actually probably better in many cases, but she does have her own advantages, and that is just that she is bulky, a very bulky type of nuker. She doesn't have to rely on the miracle that Leaf has, for example, or the fact that Leaf cannot have his own like way of guaranteeing his double. So she definitely has some advantages, and if I see you guys working with like a one-off, these are some builds that I would recommend. Effectively, Wind Sweep is really good, so sub out Trace for Wind Sweep, almost 100% a good idea, because Trace on defense isn't really all too good. While it does lower attack and defense in her case, like having your unit retreat isn't always a good idea. You want to maintain pressure, so I feel like you can keep the Trace, but something like Wind Sweep will give you better coverage. There's two builds that I feel I would recommend, which is a Poison Strike Savage Bow type of thing with Wind Sweep, so it's kind of like a Fire Sweep bow, but because she has a lot of bulk, and if you do use ARD Speed Res, she is going to be able to survive most matchups on the right teams once you factor in Mythic Blessings. A different way to do it is with Miracle. Since she has a slaying weapon and you combine it with QP, 3 charge, and her double cannot be denied in most cases, as long as she's speedy, and she's pretty speedy. She's going to charge a Miracle against anyone that isn't using a stance or special fighter type effect. While those are common, not every carry can afford to use those, such as like distant counter carries that use like Steady Breath or something like that. So you can easily set up your own miracles, and that provides Wings of Mercy chains. I use this on my Summer Mia, for example. Finally, if you really want to double down on the bulk she has, plus the effects of her weapon, you can really use stuff like wave skills, hone calves, fork calves, subbing out low attack speed, and really working on her attack and defense. Keep in mind that Ascended Fjorm does work around her Wind Sweep build and denies her the Miracle type build shown here. It's kind of funny that it works out that way. So a good way to work around that is to literally just buff her up as much as possible, use a low attack speed, use wave skills maybe, or hone cav, or just keep the Rouse. The Rouse is good if you have a team for it, but most cav type teams are usually like overlapping with not, or beside another cav, so the way I would see most people using the Rouse skill would be something like shown on the next bunch of builds here, which is where she's more isolated from her team. Maybe you have a dance trap where the 7th unit gets danced, and then she is alone and comes in to rally that dancer who's now in range of an enemy, and therefore her rouse will be activated that way, and now she can start doing things. Honestly, with the other builds I showed before, you can literally have her as the 7th unit, and she doesn't have to rely on the null panic effect, because as long as she's 7th unit, she will remove her debuffs, so it's effectively the same thing. So she makes a pretty solid 7th unit. Now, I don't expect everyone to have a +10, just kind of showing out the best sort of things you can get from here. Finally, she does make a decent arena unit because of her self-null follow-up effect. So if you have your hands on a C-Dual Cav 4 skill, then definitely with like Wind Sweep, Ruptured Sky, Blade Session, and her new Rouse skill, she's actually do really well. And between Trace and Wind Sweep, they're both very good in Arena, so it just kind of depends what the rest of your team has, but I see her doing a fantastic job in Arena. One thing I did want to mention, guys, is that in the previous builds where she's a one-off, there's no flaw, there's no Bane, because you get that free like removal of your Bane. You can opt to go for that, or just give her stuff in like attack and speed because she's going to want both stats anyways. So depending on what Banes and boons you have, keep in mind that you can remove a lot of Banes, and some of them can be pretty detrimental. Obviously, like minus speed, you don't want that, or minus attack. So work with what you got. Just make sure you try to bump up her attack and speed or keep them from being Banes. You can probably opt to like remove a little bit of HP and maybe go attack and speed, but you get the point. Should be pretty straightforward. Finally, I do want to talk about lethality. So lethality will be right under me here if you forgot what its effect is, and a couple of solid users of lethality. So lethality is like Luna, I guess, an enhanced Luna that does damage piercing. This is actually really good because if you compare it to something like Black Luna, which, you know, Black Knight has, it is countered by damage reduction. So the fact that this pierces damage reduction is really good, but what I feel is the big setback of lethality is its 4-charge special. That makes it really awkward to use with most characters. However, some ideas I have are shown here. I find it kind of funny that Soth makes a solid candidate for it, considering it comes from Volk, and Soth could never promote, and Volk could. So that's kind of weird, but it is what it is. And Soth is finally here for like the 10,000th time in a video at this point. I feel like I cover him every single anything that has to do with dagger units, Soth is shown. But that's because he's very flexible and he is a strong unit, so he deserves that spotlight. Now, if you do use lethality, in my opinion, the best way to use it is special spiral type of builds or special acceleration in some form. So if you have someone like Brave Lucina, ironically, you probably will opt to use lethality on like a tank or enemy phase type nature as opposed to like a player phase nature. I feel with like Deadeye, especially if you use someone like Uller, you're probably using Deadeye and nuking things on the player phase, and you don't use Deadeye as much on the enemy phase. Lethality, because of its high charge, kinda depends on something like Special Spiral or weapons like Peshkats that reduce the cooldown as much as possible. In the case of Soth, you can use it and then it'll bring it down to 1 charge because of the combination of Peshkats and Special Spiral. And that makes it an enemy phase very reliable type of special to fire out as much as you can. So in a tank build with Soth, and maybe if you combine them with Brave Lucina, or any of the guys here with Brave Lucina, you're going to be consistently using lethality, and it'll do a lot of damage, consistent high damage. And another thing with lethality is it wants a high attack stat, just like how Black Knight stacks attack, and it isn't hard countered by damage reduction. Which makes it, like I said, I do think it's a pretty solid special, but it has to be used in the right places. You definitely want a high attack stat, and you want some really good special acceleration. In many cases though, something like Ruptured Sky or Moonbow, as I mentioned in my impressions video, could end up competing with it, but seems like it could be pretty good, especially if we get new preference weapons on daggers that are either Brave in nature, Brave Slaying, or Brave Special Spiral. Something like this will make lethality definitely stand out. For someone like Linja, for example, who actually has Brave Slaying, the reason I don't think it's as good there is just because 2 Ruptured Skies will feel more powerful than I feel like 1 lethality. That's my opinion there. It may not always be the case, especially against some of the more tankier units, but generally speaking, that's how I feel about that. Now, as I said, you can use lethality on someone like Winter Jafar on offense. So I could see him actually being a solid candidate with it. Something like Ouch Pouch as a pre-accelerated thing, and with Winter Cecilia as well, where on defense you could definitely use it with Special Fighter to like kill someone like Claude who has damage reduction who's playing against your team, or someone who's just tanky in general. Could be someone like Bike, right? So those are definitely my candidates for lethality. I'm gonna sit on the fence about how I feel about it. Maybe I'll do an update post either on YouTube or on Twitter, but generally speaking, for now, I wouldn't be chasing after a skill like this. Finally, I want to approach the final section of this video. Alright guys, so the last part of this video here is the would you pull section, and that is what you guys get the opportunity to basically voice your opinion or decision on what you plan to do on the upcoming banner. So this is in 2 parts. One is the Patreon, which is in the description below, my inner community in the Discord and what you guys think, and of course on YouTube as well, where you guys can also like and comment with your opinions that I can also share here. So with that being said, with the first comment and what you guys have mostly I see voted on seems to be that everyone or most people tend to actually stick to their goals, and despite any new banners aren't completely tempted by it. However, Ninja Corrin's banner did have a lot of people more heavily interested. This one definitely has more people oriented towards the Spark system or just the free tickets. First comment here by Tall says, yes, just a bit beyond Spark. I've been waiting for Marcia since the beginning year of Fire Emblem Heroes. I've had fodder that I was holding on along with flowers and feathers because I had the feeling should be a demote. It's always hard to ignore favorites for me, but it would be nice to pick up Florid as well. It's kind of funny actually because Blue Lance Flyer must be a demote, right? There's not that many that are premium. There's a few, but not that many. I'm a bit happy that she didn't get the Balthus Island treatment because I haven't even seen a Balthus free one. IS needs to stop with these types of demotes, IMO, but also kind of throws my goals out of whack. I'm basically trying not to go under 300 orbs as I'm at 540 right now. So my only other goal besides Marcia is 4 merges on Claude in January. Now about that Claude in January goal, 4 merges on a legendary mythic banner in about 2 months is going to run you about 800 orbs on average, and it could get worse. So keep in mind that in like 2-3 orbs, 2-3 months of saving, it's only going to be about 600-900 orbs. So you'd be running pretty close, but it is a good idea to honestly try to pick up a few copies of Marcia if she's your favorite, because the demote characters are very rare. As I mentioned in my impressions, like I have not seen, I did not see Mustafa for like a year. I don't even know what other demotes have been demoted because I just don't see them. I think there's something like Benny. I haven't seen Benny. I believe we had Roshea who got demoted. I had not seen these characters, and you cannot really plan around seeing them unless you heavily invest into that color. So it's a good idea. I'm glad that a favorite has reached out for you, and for most people, you should keep that in mind, that if you do actually want these characters as a 4-star focus and demote, it is probably a good idea to actually target them. For you Tanith fans, it's going to be pretty difficult because I just don't see how you're going to get copies of Tanith. And like Balthus, for example, who also got shafted, it's very difficult to see those characters unless you heavily summon in that pool. Moving on though, we have a comment by Raydubs who says, just free summon and tickets. I found out the hard way on the last legendary banner that just a little bit actually meant all my orbs, which I already should have known. I didn't have a lot saved, but I don't hold myself to only free summons. I usually summon more than I wanted to. Some of these new skills look nice, but having them will not drastically change my gameplay. Yeah, I do warn you guys when you say that you're going to go beyond the Spark or say that you're just going to summon a bit, that you actually hold yourself accountable to some extent, like an orb count that you're going to go in, or maybe at least a copy or a pity break or something like that, and then you stop. Because if you hold yourself at least accountable for that particular thing, then at least you have somewhere that you're going to end. If you don't know exactly what you're aiming for with just a bit, then you're going to probably suffer and potentially lose all your orbs. So the lesson by Ray Dubs here, of course, is be careful. Make sure you have something in mind with how you intend to spend your premium currency. Finally, a comment by Anthony on YouTube says, I really like that they added Ascended Laegjarn. However, after seeing your videos, I started to make a plan as FTP, so now I'm personally focusing on saving orbs to complete my 3 elemental legends, Claude, Fjorm, and Corrin. I'll pass on this banner and wait to build my units. So again, hold yourself to your goals, what you get the most out of your game. It doesn't necessarily have to be legendary heroes or mythic heroes, but as long as you know exactly what you're playing for, it'll be fulfilling at the end of the day, and then you can likely use those characters in any of the modes and get something out of it because you've invested heavily into them. Saving orbs and keeping yourself to those goals is the best lesson I could forward to anyone watching these videos, and that is why I do these should you pull videos, because hopefully with these perspectives in mind, and you're not like joining some sort of hype trains, you actually will be able to make better decisions in a game that is predatory in nature, that definitely wants to take as much out of you as possible. And I'm talking about money, of course. So thank you guys for watching, as always, another Should You Pull series. Enjoyed this video, and if it did help you that the video was before the banner, just let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think of these banners or characters, and how you plan to like use them if you do get them, or maybe in the future. I want to hear from you. Smash the like button, sub if you haven't already. If you love me, the content, or you want to get involved with the community and their comments, then consider the Patreon. It is the best way to support this content and shows me that you guys care about the effort that I put in. Love you all. See you in the next one.
It's over.